Good evening. Thanks for joining us at 5 and streaming on KARE 11 Plus. I'm Julie Nelson.
And I'm Lauren Lemanchek. There is growing fallout tonight, 24 hours after the Trump administration announced it's pausing nearly $260 million in Medicaid payments to Minnesota.
For the first time, we're hearing from Governor Walz and the head of Human Services, which has been riddled with fraud in state programs. Attorney General Keith Ellison is already hinting at a potential lawsuit over the pause, saying courts have repeatedly found the pattern of cutting funds first and asking questions later illegal. There is now a war of words between Minnesota leaders and the White House over why this is happening.
Danny Spiewak leads us off now live from the Capitol. Danny?
Well, the Trump administration has labeled this roughly $260 million in Medicaid funding that was given to Minnesota last year as potentially questionable or fraudulent in their mind based on what they say is their review. But Governor Walz today questioned that evidence, says he believes this is part of a retribution campaign, and saying that the state is already working on the problem.
The Trump administration frequently cited fraud in Minnesota as one of the motivations behind Operation Metro Surge. Even though fraud made up only a fraction of the arrests, the White House is now refocusing its efforts on Medicaid funding.
The generosity and the good hearts of our fellow Americans are being taken advantage of.
This week, Vice President J.D. Vance announced that the federal government will claw back nearly $260 million in Medicaid funding that went to Minnesota in the last quarter of 2025.
In order to ensure that the state of Minnesota takes its obligations seriously.
In a news release, the Trump administration says it found unusually high spending, specifically inside personal care and home and community-based Medicaid services, but didn't elaborate further.
This is a targeted retribution against a state that the president doesn't like.
Governor Walz argues that Minnesota has already taken action to strengthen oversight of the 14 Medicaid programs that have been identified by the state itself as high risk, including a third-party audit and stricter payment reviews.
So they're going to freeze the money because of fraud. What specific fraud? What did you see that the state didn't do?
The Trump administration says it will pause money every quarter, totaling as much as $1 billion a year, if Minnesota doesn't submit a corrective action plan.
Why did you make an arbitrary decision to, what's the word I'm using now they're calling this?
A deferral.
A deferral. It's not, it's a ransom note.
The Trump administration's authority to pause Medicaid funding may be tested in the federal courts. Attorney General Keith Ellison says if the federal government is unlawfully withholding money meant for the 1.2 million low-income Minnesotans on Medicaid, we will see them in court.
And we have seen this scenario play out on a number of different issues, with the Trump administration being blocked by federal courts from trying to halt funding to Minnesota for things like food stamps or child care. So depending on what happens with litigation, if the Attorney General does actually file a lawsuit, you can expect this to probably end up at court at some point. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Danny.